All right, we got to talk about third parties. We got to talk about independents. We got to talk about, yes, even that cuck Bernie Sanders. I know. It's only just a little bit, of your time. Hear me out here, because the Democrats don't have an identity. But look, even I, 8 years ago, after 2016, all on board for third parties. Did I have the audacity of hope in 2018 about, I don't know, maybe you could reform the Democrats? Yes, I was that foolish. All right. If I sit here and say, oh no, I always knew. No, I had the audacity of hope and thinking, oh, maybe they could turn things around. So this is just like just a small clip of Briahna Joy Gray's interview, especially in regards to Bernie Sanders, third parties, because here's what's happening. Bernie is going to be sheep herding people into the Democrat Party along with AOC. I've made my thoughts on this very clear. I see 2028 being a potential AOC run for her to be the progressive stand-in for Bernie Sanders, only to be an epic fail, just like we saw in 2016 and by some extent 2020. I want to be wrong. Just like that scene in Jurassic Park where the Tyrannosaur busts out of the paddock and Ian Malcolm says, God, I hate it when I'm right.
Like 8 years ago, I was all third party.
So what happened? What happened to that?
Sanders happened. Yeah, I saw what he was able to do.
Well, that's a bummer. Like, that's an indictment. I would argue that that's exactly why there should be a lot of skepticism around the sheep herding inclinations of people like Senator Sanders. And why is it that someone like this is in the space?
I agree. I think what Sanders did was he squandered what leverage, what opportunities he had. I agree. And he ended up sheep herding people into a wasteland. I agree.
Yeah, exactly. He did. That's what Bernie Sanders did. He sheep herded us all into a wasteland. I fell for it, and I'm going to sit here and admit it. Yeah, I fell for the charm of Bernie Sanders' campaign. Myself and Daniel Hell, we created Hard Lens Media in the response of the words from Bernie Sanders about fighting for a better future. Such a shame, though, that all of us who got involved in independent media, who in some form or another might have got inspired by Bernie, turned out to be more authentic than Bernie Sanders ever was. Because when we play, and look, I played that clip segment of me interviewing Jimmy Dore way back in 2017. Shout out to Chanda, shout out to Nico House, shout out to Jimmy. When we were all there and we had that audacity of hope, that thought, that mindset of, hey, maybe, just maybe, Bernie Sanders will actually lead a third-party movement. I was there in McCormick Place. I was there when this was happening in Chicago. I saw it all happen live and direct right before us. And you want to know what happened? When Bernie Sanders was confronted by the people in that auditorium, thousands of people were saying to Bernie that he was cheated, and he dismissed their concerns. He did. And I just want to play this short video segment. A huge shout out to Case Study QB. Huge shout out to Case Study QB. We played this on Monday's show, of course, but it's important for us to hear it again.
Let's talk about what you have called your oligarchy tour. You and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have been crisscrossing the country, warning of an emerging oligarchy. Senator, you told the New York Times, I'm going to read this quote, one of the aspects of this tour is to try to rally people to get engaged in the political process and run as independents outside of the Democratic Party. As someone who twice ran in the Democratic presidential primary, are you trying to strengthen the Democratic Party? Or, Senator, are you trying to start a third party?
Now, we're not trying to start a third party. What we're trying to do is strengthen American democracy, where faith in both the Democratic and Republican parties right now is extremely low. We are living, Kristen, in the richest country in the history of the world. And yet you got one person, Mr. Musk, who owns.
So already right there, he's not talking about third parties. He's not going to do it. He's not going to do it. I'm sorry. He won't do it. I was there. You know what? And that should have been my wake-up call way back in 2017. That should have been it. As soon as everybody, it was almost as if it's like a scene from a Shakespearean play, you know, where Mark Antony, I think this is the best example, where Mark Antony was holding Caesar's body and giving his eulogy and saying how he thrice tried to give Caesar the crown. You know, we've all heard that story when Julius Caesar was in the early days of power, and Mark Antony, not once, not twice, but 3 times offered a crown to Caesar. And the crowd kept on saying no. Maybe it was a ploy by Caesar to say, hey, give me the crown, see how the people react. Oh, and Bernie Sanders dismissed the crowd. And everyone was saying no. Maybe he wasn't factoring in, or maybe he was. Because his job so far, to me, after the 2016 election cycle, and looking at it with clear eyes in 2020 as well, after so many years, his goal was just to get people in the Democratic Party. You can't reform something that doesn't want to be reformed. David Hogg is the vice chair of the DNC, and you have the main chair of the DNC dismissing what David Hogg wants to do. Now, it could be all for song and dance, but I've done so many interviews with candidates who ran as progressives, as independents, trying to run the Democratic Party, be it under brand new Congress, Our Revolution, DSA, or Justice Democrats, and their stories were always the same, and that is, I'm being blacklisted, the DCCC is being involved, the Democrats are being involved, I'm being blacklisted from the media, I'm not getting coverage, I'm being censored. It's always the same. Bernie Sanders might talk a big game about fighting the oligarchy, but he won't do it in his own backyard. Now that Trump is president and Biden isn't, now that there's no Democrat majority in the Senate and House, oh, now we could be rabble-rousers. Hey, everybody, what about the Senate parliamentarian? Remember how that was a big deal? I do. I remember that. The Senate parliamentarian, the non-elected official that has no power whatsoever, and the last Senate parliamentarian that tried to pull their weight around was actually fired. That was under the Bush-Cheney administration. Just throwing it out there. I want to pull up another video here from Case Study QB, who, again, is wrongly being censored. Case Study QB is #1 in my book, because somehow he's able to sit through corporate media and not have his brain melted. Somehow he's able to pull that off.
In 2022, after the midterms, I said, if you want to run for president and be the Democratic nominee, anybody who wants to run should be able to run. Unfortunately, nobody, well, a couple people, but
Dean Phillips.
Right, Dean Phillips stepped up. Democrats.
Dean Phillips, Marianne Williamson, RFK Jr., and of course, Fat Tony, aka Cenk Uygur, Hassan's uncle.
We should have had a primary for this midterm election, and we didn't. And so now we're living.
Oh, there was a primary. Oh, there was a primary. I'm sure Keaton, who covered the New Hampshire primary the Democrats had, would beg to differ. I'm pretty sure a couple of my colleagues in independent media would raise their hands and say, excuse me. And look, I know everyone has their opinion about RFK Jr., but to be clear here, we got to be fair here. We got to be honest here. There was a primary that the Democrats and corporate media ignored. And remember, what did that nutless wonder Bernie Sanders do as soon as Joe Biden said he was running for re-election? He went out there like a good sheepdog and barked and howled at the moonlight to say, everybody support my good friend Joe, whose brain was not fully functioning at all, period. In fact, wasn't functioning throughout his entire presidency. There was a primary. RFK Jr. was running it. Hell, that's why he had to drop out of the race, because it's very clear the Democratic establishment was doing all what they could to kick him out and remove him. Marianne Williamson, however your opinions about her, she was in the primary. Then she dropped out and then re-entered again. Then you had Dean Phillips, the only Democrat politician to actually run in the primary. And then you had Cenk Uygur as well, but his campaign was, I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know what he was thinking. Sometimes that boy ain't right. Hank Hill about Bobby Hill. There was a primary. There was a primary, but the Democratic establishment and corporate media said, no, there wasn't. We've done so many videos and interviews. We've done so many segments about how there was a primary and how the primary rules were changing because they were doing it all to benefit, you guessed it, Joe Biden, and then later on, Kamala Harris. How do we know? It's because we covered the DNC convention here in Chicago.
With the consequences of it. I hope that our party wakes up and realizes it. And that me saying that doesn't mean that I don't respect Joe Biden. But there's a reality in that we should have given our voters an opportunity to make a decision for themselves. And by the time we had to make a decision, it was too late.
By the way, it's just 3 straight nominations where Democratic voters didn't get a chance to pick the nominee. The elites picked Hillary Clinton, the elites picked Joe Biden, and the elites picked Kamala Harris. There was no actual set of voters who felt like they had a say in this.
Yeah.
I'm also still wondering. So let's just assume that Democrats do not decide that they are interested in reformulating the pizza. They just want to spend time focused on refashioning the pizza box. I still don't even know what that's going to be. I mean, here we were talking about a strongly worded letter, and that got the endorsement of like, yep, that's what we need to be doing, more strongly worded letters. I'm not really sure that Democrats yet have figured out stylistically how do we want to.
I mean, the voters think that that's incredibly lame right now. Right?
Yeah.
That's what they're
Yeah,
telling.
yeah.
Right?
Remember the paddles at the State of the Union?
Wait, I'll just
Falls?
okay. I think that there are some different conversations that are happening in the party. There are people like myself who are like, I'm getting out of Washington, D.C. I didn't stay here for the correspondence dinner. You know why? Because the voters I want to talk to, they aren't watching the correspondence dinner, whether there was a comedian or not. That is not what people are focusing on. They're not, sadly, getting their news from CNN. They're getting their news from online. And so I
want to pause here. They're not getting their news from CNN. They're getting it online. Now, there's a lot of problems with the online media. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There are people there who are, it could be argued, they're getting their fair share of paid advertisers, and it almost looks shockingly like a corporate media segment from CNN or Fox News. Yes, there is problems with online media. There's nothing I can do about it. Everyone has a right to do their own kind of show. But that is a signal of, we need to start stomping down on independent media. See, CNN and MSNBC, they had a problem after November 5th, and that is they lost a lot of viewership after November 5th of 2024. They were hemorrhaging viewers. They were bleeding out viewers. They are dying on the vine. And CNN, want to make itself look more authoritative, is failing at every single moment of every single day because the establishment media isn't trusted. So in turn, they look at something that is, well, causing them trouble. And that is, you guessed it, independent media. They view independent media with hatred. They view independent media with scorn, because they don't like what independent media can do and how it can inspire people to fight for a better future, to step up for ourselves, and dare I say it, actually get people to think critically. Now, there are problems. There are much more larger channels that are very suspicious. There are accounts that somehow seem to get all the figgy pudding, but yet here we are. But I don't like that kind of talk, because what does that mean, going after online media? The Democrats, during the 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration, created, well, a very effective and all-killing, all-knowing censorship apparatus. How do I know? Because for the most time, Harlan's media was terminated, censored, suppressed, kicked off, hanged, almost left on the streets to die, and yet we always came back because of you, our audience. It was done under a Democrat administration. All of it happened under the 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration. I got that 1,000-mile stare in my eyes, and the thing is, I can't help but bring this all the way back down to Bernie Sanders, who, like the nutless wonder that we all know he is, decided to support his good friend Joe not once but twice, especially going into 2024. All this was happening. So all this talk about Bernie Sanders fighting for this oligarchy tour and identity and everything else, all it is to help promote the Democrats, who in turn created a massive wave of censorship. There's a lot of people I know in independent media. A lot of people I know who are right now hurting because of the last 4 years. It's not good out there, folks. It's pretty bad. The long-term consequences of what happened under the Democratic administration of Joe Biden is saying a lot. Now, the Trump administration says that they removed it and ended it. Oh, I want to believe that, but I press X to doubt. I do. I truly do. Because I've learned not to be so idealistic. I'm learning how to stop having these idealistic thoughts, as much as I would love to share it. But that's a concern. I want to rewind this again here.
Dinner, whether there was a comedian or not, that is not what people are focusing on. They're not, sadly, getting their news from CNN. They're getting their news from online. And so I have also said this, that when Donald Trump lost in 2020, Republicans didn't change their message. They actually doubled down on it. I do think Democrats have policies that people like. I do think we have a communications, and I think we have a messenger problem right now, which goes to the candidates. So we need to make sure we have, we talk about being the Big Tent Coalition. We actually need to be the Big Tent Coalition, which means sometimes you will have in your coalition people you don't always agree with. But
and how the Democrats treated that Big Tent coalition of progressives, independents, and dare I say it, third-party supporters. They dismissed them. kicked them down. Let's look at the Palestinian Americans who wanted to speak at the DNC convention in Chicago. They were kicked outside. Let's talk about people who did want to reform the Democrats, like Justice Democrats, Brand New Congress, Our Revolution, DSA. I know I keep repeating their names. How were they treated? Oh, they were kicked outside. Am I missing something here? So when I played that earlier segment of Briahna Joy Gray and talking about third parties, yeah, there was enthusiasm for it, but Bernie Sanders led us to this wasteland. It was a wasteland of constantly getting the middle finger. That's what Bernie Sanders led us to. He led us to nowhere, to where we get ridiculed, where we get shamed, where we get bullied, and we get cast aside. And if you don't follow the Democrat narrative, you're kicked out. You're deemed a bad guy. You're a racist. You're a sexist. You are a Trump supporter. You're all these phobes and everything else. You're all these isms. At this point, Democrats, my goodness. I mean, listen, after doing this show for 8 years, I've had so many people, quote unquote, liberals say, oh, you're a Trump supporter. This is a Trump channel. Oh, you're secretly supporting all third parties. Oh, you want to support Trump. No, I don't. I don't support the two-party system. I don't believe in the two-party system. I don't like being lied to, and I don't like being led to a wasteland. You see, Trump, controversial statement here, is a little bit honest because he at least talked to his people and has made these bold statements, but at least he's been honest about his bold statements here and there. Bernie, oh, he's made bold statements, but they all led to the Democrat tent.
That's what was so special about the Democratic Party. I don't have to get 100% at it, but
saying you are going to send a strongly worded letter in today's political climate is roughly the equivalent of putting a slice of cheese on a frozen hamburger patty on a grill, which Chuck Schumer is famous for doing. You've totally missed.
That is such. I got to rewind that again. That's actually pretty funny.
Roughly the equivalent of putting a slice of cheese.
A strongly worded letter. Yeah, a strongly worded letter helps out a lot, doesn't it?
You are going to send a strongly worded letter in today's political climate is roughly the equivalent of putting a slice of cheese on a frozen hamburger patty on a grill, which Chuck Schumer is famous for doing. You've totally missed.
I was wondering where you're going there. Right.
You've completely and totally misunderstood the way political communications work, just the way you misunderstand the way grills work. That is not going to cut it for them. And by the way, Clyburn saying he had no idea Joe Biden was in decline and wasn't in a position to know whether he was in decline, his biggest supporter in Congress, Lord have mercy. The scandal deepens is what I took away from that.
Oof. Oh my God. And so the final word is, guess what? Democrats, you don't have a policy. Bernie, you're fight the oligarchy tour. I know there's a lot of people going to it for a hopium copium to feel good. And you know something? I hope that it does brightens people's souls up. Just don't be drinking the Kool-Aid. Okay, I'm not going to tell people what to do. If you are somebody who's a progressive and independent and you want to hear Bernie Sanders and AOC speak, go for it. Participate in it. I've been to a couple. And you know what? There is that calmness, the kindness, the sleepish feeling of, yes, we can do it. Yes, we could bring in change. But it's a drug. It's cult mentality. And all politicians, all parties do it. I get it. I was all for third. Look, I don't know if I'm gonna vote in 2026 or 2028. I don't know. I feel very different about politics, especially with going into the last year that we went through. I feel very different about how it all played out. I feel certain things about politics. It could have made a real big change if Bernie Sanders actually had the courage to fight, but he didn't have it in him. He didn't have that dog in him. He never had what it took to actually be a leader. And that's a sad thing, folks. He's not a fighter. He could have chose to lead, but he didn't. He chose to run away back to the Democrats and lead all of his followers with him. So if you're in the Fight the Oligarchy tour, you're going to these events, just remember, they're going to tell you to vote for the establishment pick. Don't say you didn't get warned by Hard Lens Media.